silence. It can be good. Good for us physically, mentally, emotionally, even spiritually. But there's another side of silence which you may have just experienced when it becomes awkward or uncomfortable. And even when we think we're in control, as I am, I can assure you it was still awkward and uncomfortable to stand before you in silence. But what about when that silence is forced upon us? How do we feel then? We go from awkward and uncomfortable to feelings of distress and being overwhelmed. We all deal with silence. Sometimes we just don't like to admit it. I love old pictures, and in this picture are some of my family members circa 1951-52. On the left is my maternal grandmother. And looking at that picture, you would not know that she had 15 pregnancies in 15 years. And of the 12 surviving children, she raised them mostly single-handedly because she was married to an abuser and an alcoholic. In the middle, an uncle who would deal most of his life in the silence of same-sex attraction. And on the right, if you look real close, you can see a wedding band on the hand of my sweet mom. That was her first marriage. And within a year or so of that marriage, she would have her first child, a little boy. And her husband, also abusive, would desert them. And so she found herself in a forced silence of being a single mom in the early to mid-50s. Not a place that any of us would want to be. But in the midst of those silences that each of them dealt with, they had something known as family. And family loves. Family loves, and they usually do not judge, nor are they condemning. And one of the things that is exemplified through that love for family is the fact that they listen. They use their ears and they bring comfort and reassurance to those that are struggling within their family, within their circle of love. And so what happens there is listening starts a healing process, not only for the one who is listening, but also for the one who is sharing. I don't think it's just happenstance that in the word heart, we find the word hear. I'll throw out a term to you I'm sure you're used to, and that is a crash cart or a code card. I think sometimes you may even refer to it as a max cart. Imagine, if you will, that love has a cart. And when we encounter those that we love, that are struggling, that are dealing with some sort of forced silence, we go to that cart. And I would suggest that two of the most important tools that we can use in that cart are our ears. Our ears that are connected to our heart, and we love with our listening. And in that hearing, we encourage others to share. And in that sharing, they find healing. I'll share with you two pictures. In the time frame there, you understand very well. The first one was late November, early December of 2019, and the second one is late March of 2021. You know it as a forced silence of COVID-19. I know it as when my mother's dementia went into overdrive. It's a difficult time. As a matter of fact, it's a time that I struggled with, as all of us do, with the separation. But there was some saving grace there. In the midst of that forced silence, the restrictions and the lockdowns, my mom's family grew. And by extension, my family grew. That's my sister on the right there. You probably noticed the family resemblance. And on the days that my mom was lucid, they would share. And my mom started to tell her stories of the family. You know, the skeletons in the closet, the silence that we do not talk about. You see, it had went beyond a task list, the job analysis, what that nurse was supposed to do every day, what she was hired and paid to do. It had grown into family. It was now love, and she was listening. And even in the midst of being restricted from her family, my mom's family grew. And she found healing and sharing with this nurse. And here's what I have found in the last 4 days in visiting with you. And that is what I thought was the exception at Friendship Manor Assisted Living in Roanoke, Virginia, in watching you and listening and partaking with you in these sessions. I found that wasn't the exception. It's the norm. It's an extended family. And all of you stepped out past what was expected of you. And you loved. You listened. And you brought about healing. Even in the midst of that forced silence. And when the restrictions lifted, that nurse pulled me to the side one day and told me not only the things that my mom had shared with her, but the things she had shared with my mom, things that she had never told anyone else in her life. And so here's what they discovered, and I think, if I might be so presumptuous to say that here's what all of us discovered. 2 things. That if we work together with love and respect, we can start to erode away that silence, that forced silence. But secondly, and perhaps even more importantly, that everyone, patient and caregiver, administrator, dietitian, janitor, LPN, RN, administrative assistants, everyone was going through that forced silence together. And everyone was suffering through it with pain and even hurt. It's a process, and it is a painful process. Sometimes, even with a listening device, I couldn't break through the silence. I was talking, and all Mom could hear was noise because of the silence of dementia. But then there were other times when I didn't need a whiteboard, I didn't need a listening device, where I could sit down and Mom would interpret my lap as an excellent place to put her feet. And without any words spoken, we actually sat in silence and smiled. You see, our presence and our comfort after those restrictions brought healing. And it was if we were even smirking at that forced silence, because now we could sit in silence and still bring comfort and love to each other. Here's what I learned, and I want to share with you. That if we remain diligent, positive, and loving, listening and sharing through this process, we just might find ourselves straight up chilling. Maybe in matching pink or lavender, maybe not. You know, I struggled during that entire process of COVID-19, the lockdown and the restrictions. I struggled asking myself, is that the right place for my mom? Should she be home with me? And each time I asked myself that question, the answer was yes. Let me tell you where the final question and the final answer came. On September 27th, my mother died. Not from COVID, but from the advancement of dementia and just old age. That means I buried my mom less than 2 weeks ago. And the day after she died, my daughter and I gathered flowers. And we went to the 5th floor of Friendship Assisted Living where Mom lived. And usually when you got off the elevator there, you might see one staff member at the nurse's station. This may be a shock to you, but you usually don't have time to sit there. But when my daughter and I got off the elevators, we'd done many times, there was like 7 or 8 people there instead of maybe just one. It was if someone had brought them all together just for us to come off that elevator and share flowers with them. And when we stepped off the elevator and they raised their eyes and made eye contact, a forced silence fell in that lobby area. You know the silence of death. The silence you hear at a funeral home. The hushed condolences and sympathies. And they all gathered around and with tears expressed their sorrow. But then something miraculous happened. Without a leader, but collectively, the volume began to rise. And before I knew it, with tears running down our cheeks, we were laughing and proclaiming her name. We were saying my mom's name and sharing the stories that each of us had of her. It became so loud, and this is the truth, that people from the 3rd floor came up because they could hear it. And together we joined in for 10 or 12 minutes, almost the length of this talk. And we broke even the silence of death. That's when I had the answer to my question. It was the right place for my mom to be. I am not a good representative for this, but on behalf of all of the families that you have touched, all of the communities that you have touched, on behalf of our nation, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. God bless you.